my fiancée said during a family dinner. I'm not sure I'm ready for this wedding. I stood up, thanked everyone for coming, canceled the venue reservation the next day, accepted a job offer in another country, and life quietly moved forward. I'm not sure I'm ready for this wedding. She said it quietly, almost like she was thinking out loud, like the words had slipped past a gate she had meant to keep closed. But the table heard it. Every single person at that table heard it. I set my fork down slowly, not dramatically, just slowly. I looked at the tablecloth, at the small candle in the center of the table, at my mother's water glass catching the light from overhead, at the bread basket to my right, at everything, really, except the woman sitting 2 chairs to my left. The woman I had proposed to 11 months ago. The woman who had said yes without a single pause. The woman who had spent the last year choosing flowers, tasting cake samples, debating between champagne and blush for the bridesmaids' dresses. The woman whose engagement ring caught the light in the same way as that water glass. I did not look at the ring. I looked at the tablecloth. There were 14 people at that table. Both our families. Her parents, her older sister, her aunt, and uncle who had flown in from across the country specifically for this dinner. My parents, my brother, my cousin who had driven 6 hours yesterday just to be here. 2 of her close friends who had come early in the weekend. Everyone invited specifically because we had thought it would be meaningful. A pre-wedding dinner, we had called it. A way to bring both families together before the big day. The big day that was 9 weeks away. 9 weeks. The conversation at the table stopped the way noise stops when something breaks. Not gradually. All at once. Her mother, Diane, blinked twice. Her father looked at Claire the way someone looks when they're deciding whether or not they heard something correctly. My mother went very still. I know what my mother looks like when she goes still. It means she is deciding whether or not to speak. She chose not to speak. Nobody spoke. Claire was looking at the linen tablecloth with an expression I recognized, but had never seen at full volume before. That expression she got when she was working something out in her head, when she was wrestling with a thought she hadn't fully arrived at yet. Except usually that expression appeared in private, on the couch at the end of a long day, not at a table surrounded by 14 people who had traveled here for us. I pushed my chair back. Slowly, calmly, I stood up and I picked up my wine glass. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, I said. My voice was steady. I am still a little proud of how steady my voice was. It genuinely means a great deal to us that you made the time to travel here and be together. I smiled. Not a real smile, but a real enough one. Let's enjoy the rest of the evening. And I sat back down. I refilled my glass. I asked my brother what he thought of the restaurant's bread, because we had discussed earlier that the bread was exceptional. He answered me. Conversation slowly returned to the table, a little forced at first, like everyone was picking up scattered pieces and carefully placing them back. Then more naturally, because people are good at that, at choosing normalcy over the alternative. Claire looked at me once during that recovery. I didn't look back. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I'm 34. She was 31. We had been together for 3 years before I proposed. Good years, mostly. The kind of relationship where you occasionally look around at friends who are struggling with their partnerships and feel a quiet, genuine gratitude. We were not perfect. We argued the way adults argue. About money. About how I had a tendency to go quiet when I was stressed, and how she had a tendency to push harder when I went quiet. About the fact that she felt I didn't share enough of myself, and I felt she sometimes demanded more than I had to give on any given day. But we loved each other. Or I thought we did. Or at least I believed that what we had was the kind of foundation that holds. I proposed on a Thursday evening in November. No occasion. No anniversary. No rehearsed speech. Just a night when we were sitting in her apartment after dinner, and the feeling arrived in me, very clearly and without hesitation, that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. So I asked. She cried. She said yes. She called her mother from the kitchen while I was still sitting there on the couch with the ring box open on the coffee table. I sat there listening to her voice through the wall and thought, this is it. This is where things begin. The drive home from the restaurant was quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet we had built over 3 years. The other kind. Claire sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap and her gaze somewhere out the window. I drove without speaking. When we reached her apartment, she unlocked the door and I followed her inside, and we stood in the entryway for a moment. That kind of standing where neither person knows who is supposed to move first. Do you want to talk about it? She asked. Not tonight, I said. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I know that, I said. I wasn't trying to humiliate you in front of everyone. I know that too. She looked at me for a long moment. Something in her face was searching for something in mine. Whatever she was looking for, I don't know if she found it. Okay, she said quietly. I kissed her on the forehead. I said goodnight. I left. I drove home through streets that were empty at that hour. I parked. I sat in the car for a few minutes before going inside. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark and I thought about those 8 words. Not in a spiraling, panicked way. More the way you turn something unfamiliar over in your hands and try to understand its weight. I'm not sure I'm ready for this wedding. Not, I don't love you. Not, I don't want to marry you. Not even, I want to stop this. Ready for this wedding. The wedding specifically. I kept examining that distinction. And the more I examined it, the more the distinction began to lose its meaning. Because what is a wedding, if not the public acknowledgement of something you've already decided privately? If you're certain about the person, you're certain about the wedding. The venue doesn't matter. The flowers don't matter. The invitations and the seating chart and the centerpiece debates don't matter. What matters is that you have chosen. And in front of 14 people, including both sets of parents, including friends who had traveled to be there, she had said out loud that she had not fully chosen. Not yet. Maybe not at all. I stared at the ceiling until a faint gray light started coming through the window. Then I fell asleep. I woke up knowing what I was going to do. Not because I had planned it. More like my mind had worked quietly through the night and left the conclusion on the nightstand for me. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table for a while. I watched the street outside through the window. Then I called the venue. The woman who answered was kind and professional. I told her I needed to cancel the reservation. She offered the option to postpone. I told her I was certain I wanted to cancel. She walked me through the process. I would lose the deposit. I had already made peace with losing the deposit. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat there for a few more minutes with my hands around my coffee mug. I thought I would feel grief. I thought I would feel anger. Instead, I felt something quieter, something cleaner, something that, if I'm being completely honest, was uncomfortably close to relief. I sat with that feeling for a long time before I let myself think about what it might mean. We met the next day at a coffee place near her apartment, the one we had been to so many times it had become ours without ever deciding that. She was already there when I arrived. She was wearing the blue sweater I had always liked. Her hands were wrapped around a mug, and she looked like she hadn't slept either. I sat down across from her. The waiter came, I ordered, and we were quiet for a moment. I panicked, she said. I could see that, I said. It's not that I don't want to marry you. It's been so much the last few months. The planning and the families and the expectation coming from every direction. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was being carried somewhere and my feet weren't touching the ground. I listened. I let her finish. Okay, I said. Okay. I believe you felt that. She exhaled. Some of the tension left her shoulders. I called the venue this morning, I said. She looked at me differently. What? I canceled the reservation. She stared at me for a moment. Why would you do that without talking to me first? Because, I said, you told me, in front of both our families, that you weren't sure you were ready. I told you. I panicked. It came out wrong. I hear that, I said. But here's the thing, Claire. Whether it was panic or not, and I genuinely believe it was panic, it was still the truth. It came out because it was already in there. She opened her mouth. She closed it. I've been watching you for the last 2 months, I said. Not with accusation, just as a fact. And the way you look when we talk about the wedding isn't what I call excitement. It isn't the kind of nerves people describe when they're about to do something wonderful. It's something else. Something heavier. I've just been under pressure. I know. The deadline at work and your mother calling every other day about the seating chart. I know all of that is real. Then, Claire. She stopped. I leaned forward. Do you want to marry me? Not the venue. Not the flowers. Not the dress and the photography and the perfect spring date. Me. Do you want to marry me? She looked at me for a long time. A long, long time. And then she said, of course I do. But there was a pause before it. A pause that lasted maybe 3 seconds. Maybe 4. And those seconds held more information than anything that came after them. I nodded slowly. I know, I said. And I meant it as a kindness. Not as an accusation. Just as an acknowledgement that I understood exactly what that pause had said. I want to be careful here, because what I'm about to say is not simple. I loved her. I need that on the record. I genuinely, completely loved her. And I believe that in the version of us that existed before the pressure and the planning and the weight of everyone else's expectations arrived in full force, she genuinely loved me too. But love is not the same as certainty. And a marriage requires certainty, or at the very minimum, the steady willingness to keep choosing each other on the days when certainty runs thin. She was not choosing me. She was waiting to feel certain, waiting for the doubt to pass, waiting for something internal to shift enough that she could move forward with confidence. And I had watched that waiting for months without naming it. I had told myself it was stress, natural anxiety before a major life change. I had told myself what you tell yourself when you love someone and don't want the story to change direction. But the dinner had named it. Loudly, publicly, in front of 14 people who went quiet all at once. I want to go back to something, because I think it matters. About a month before the dinner, Claire and I had attended the wedding of a close friend of hers. Beautiful event. Outdoor ceremony, late afternoon, the kind of golden light that makes everything feel like a memory while it's still happening. At some point during the reception, I turned to look at her, and she was watching the couple on the dance floor with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not sad, not envious, exactly. Wistful, like she was looking at something and searching for a feeling she expected to find, but couldn't quite locate. Afterward, on the drive home, I asked her what she had been thinking during the first dance. She said, "Nothing, just that it was lovely." I let it go. I shouldn't have let it go. Not because the answer itself was necessarily dishonest, but because I had seen the expression and then overridden my own instinct. I had noticed something, felt it pull at me, and then deliberately looked away. Because looking away was easier than asking the question that came with what I had seen. That is the thing nobody fully prepares you for in a relationship. Not the big dramatic moments. The small quiet ones. The moment when you notice something and choose not to examine it. The moment when a question forms in you and you swallow it before it can surface. The moments when you say nothing because saying something might cost you something you are not ready to lose. I had been swallowing those moments for months. And the dinner table had been the evening when the swallowing stopped. For both of us, in different ways. The weeks after were strange in a specific, practical way. There is a particular disorientation that comes with dismantling a future you had fully inhabited in your mind. Not just emotionally. Logistically. I called the caterer. I called the photographer, a woman who had been warm and professional from the very first meeting. I canceled the honeymoon flights and the hotel, which required 2 separate phone calls on 2 separate days. I returned a set of things we had bought together for the new apartment we had been planning to move into after the wedding. Each task was its own small finality. The caterer was understanding. The photographer was gracious about it. The airline was complicated, but manageable. My parents called. My mother first, the morning after I'd told them. She did not say "I told you so." I appreciated that more than she probably knew. She simply said, "Are you okay?" I said yes. She said, "Are you really okay? Or is that just what you're saying?" I said, "I'll be okay. That's the honest version." She said, "That's the right answer." My father said, "You did the right thing." He is not a man of many words, and when he uses them, they land with weight. My brother sent me a message that said only, "I've got you." 3 words. I had to sit with that one for a few minutes. Her side was harder. Diane, Claire's mother, called once. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was kind and sad and apologetic in the particular way of a parent who loves their child deeply but knows their child has done something painful. I appreciated the call. I did not return it. Not because I held anything against Diane, but because the conversation that was needed was not one I had the capacity for at that point. About 5 weeks after the cancellation, something unexpected happened. A recruiter contacted me about a role I had applied for, almost absent-mindedly, 14 months earlier. Before the engagement, before the venue and the caterer and the save the dates and the tasting menus. At a time when I had been restless in a way I couldn't fully articulate and had started sending out applications almost as a form of taking stock. What do I actually want? I had asked myself at the time. Where would I go if there was nothing holding me in place? And one of the answers had been a company I admired greatly, in a city I had been to once and had never stopped thinking about. A role I was genuinely built for. I had forgotten about the application. Completely. Life had continued. The engagement had happened. The planning had consumed every available surface of my mind. And the restlessness had quietly stepped aside to make room for the future I was building. But it had never fully disappeared. And now the recruiter was on the phone telling me they had a position open, and my profile was exactly what they had been looking for. I told her I would call her back. I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. I should tell you about my work. Not because it's the center of the story, but because it provides context for what came next. I work in project development, the kind of work that travels with you, because it lives in your mind and your methods and your professional relationships rather than in any particular office. I had been at my company for 4 years. Good work, people I respected, reasonable compensation. But I had been standing still in a way that created a low-level restlessness I could only manage when the rest of my life was full. When you're building something important at home, standing still at work becomes tolerable. When the home thing unravels, the work thing starts to feel smaller than it actually is. I called the recruiter back the following morning. I told her I was interested. We scheduled the first interview for the following week. I did not mention any of this to Claire. We were no longer engaged, but we were still in that particular in-between phase that follows the end of something that had been the center of your daily life for 3 years. We checked in occasionally. Careful, brief messages. Making sure the other person was okay. It was a little painful and, I think, necessary. But the interviews were mine. The opportunity was mine. And for the first time in longer than I could clearly remember, I was making a decision that belonged entirely to me. No consideration of timelines or proximity or what it would mean for a shared future. Just, what do I want? And the answer was clearer than I expected. I had 4 interviews across 6 weeks, each one sharper and more engaging than the last. The role was genuinely challenging. The team impressed me in every exchange. The city was one I had spent 3 days in during a conference, and had felt something during those 3 days that I had never fully been able to dismiss. It's a specific thing when a place gets under your skin. Not because it's perfect. No city is perfect. But because it fits the particular shape of who you are. I had walked those streets 3 years ago in between conference sessions and thought, very quietly, I could live here. And then I had flown home, proposed to Claire the following month, and let the thought dissolve into the future I was building. But the thought had never fully gone. During my 3rd interview, the hiring manager, a direct and thoughtful man named Conrad, asked me plainly why I was looking to make a significant move at this point in my career. I considered the professional answer. Growth, scope, opportunity, challenge. All true. All genuinely real. Instead, I said, my personal circumstances changed recently. I realized I had been making decisions based on a future that no longer exists. So I'm recalibrating. And this role, in this city, is the most honest answer I have for where I want to go. Conrad looked at me for a moment. Then he said, that's the most straightforward answer I've had in a very long time. I received the written offer 3 weeks later. I told my parents first. My mother sat very still. Not the bad kind of still. The kind that means she is processing something carefully before she speaks. When? She asked. I told her the start date. She nodded. My father said, you've been there before, haven't you? Once, I said. 3 days. And you liked it? Very much. He nodded, as if that settled it. My mother said, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Are you running away from something, or running towards something? I sat with the question. I didn't give her the quick answer. I gave her the true one. Toward, I said. Genuinely toward. She looked at me for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything else. She was not that kind of mother, the kind who needs to fill every moment with words. She gave me her hand instead. That was enough. I texted Claire about it rather than calling. Not because I was afraid of the conversation, because telling her in person would have felt like asking for her permission, or her reaction, or her blessing. And I didn't want any of those things. The decision was made. I just wanted her to hear it from me rather than from someone else eventually. I wrote, taking a job offer abroad. Leaving next month. Wanted you to hear it from me directly. She replied after about an hour. Wow. Okay. Which country? I told her. She wrote back. I've always wanted to go there. I didn't respond to that. There was nothing useful to say. Then, a few minutes later, I hope it's everything you're looking for. I believe she meant it. Claire, whatever else she had been uncertain about, was not a person who would say something like that insincerely. I replied, take care of yourself. She said, you too. And that was the last real exchange we had. I want to say something about the weeks between accepting the offer and departing. People tend to assume that kind of transition must be complete chaos. Logistically, it was genuinely complex. I gave notice at my job. I arranged a sublet for my apartment. I sold some furniture, put the rest into storage. I had the kinds of dinners with friends that go on too long and involve too much wine and the particular quality of conversation that makes you understand why you built a life somewhere in the first place. But emotionally, it was not chaos. It was quiet. A deep, particular quietness that I had not felt in years. The kind that arrives when you stop holding the shape of a life that was never quite yours to begin with. I had been holding that shape for a while, not unhappily, not with resentment, but the shape had come apart at a restaurant table on a Tuesday evening, and what remained was just me. And me, it turned out, was not as frightening as I might have expected. My oldest friend, Aaron, drove me to the airport. We had been close since our first year of university. The kind of friendship that doesn't require much maintenance because it is built on something solid. We drove mostly in comfortable silence. He played music I liked without asking. He handed me a coffee at the drive-thru without asking how I took it, because he has known how I take my coffee for 15 years. At the departure's drop-off, he got out of the car, and we stood there on the pavement for a moment. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" "Like yourself," he said. "Like your actual self. The version I remember." "Is that an insult?" "It's the opposite," he said. We hugged. He told me to call him when I landed. I told him I would. He said, "Don't disappear on me." I said, "I'm not disappearing. I'm arriving somewhere." He laughed. He got back in the car. I picked up my bag and walked into the terminal without looking back. The flight was long. I had a window seat. I watched the city pull away beneath me and then disappear into a layer of cloud. I thought about the last 3 years. About the proposal on the couch, the ring box on the coffee table. About 3 years of good dinners and small arguments, and the particular ordinary contentment of sharing a life with someone. About the wedding of her friend, and the look on Claire's face during the first dance. About all the moments I had noticed and then deliberately looked away from. About the dinner table, the 14 faces, my mother going very still. And then I thought about what I had felt in the moment after I had stood up, thanked everyone, and sat back down with a refilled wine glass. That stillness, that quiet, uncomplicated clarity, like something that had been pressing against a closed door for a long time, had finally been allowed through. And I thought, I owe her something for that. Not gratitude in any simple or uncomplicated sense, but something like acknowledgement. The kind you give to moments that hurt you and free you at the same time. She had told the truth, accidentally, publicly, at exactly the wrong moment. And it was the truest thing she had given me in 3 years. I looked out the window at the clouds for a long time. Then I slept. I landed early in the morning. The city was cool and gray and smelled like rain that had just stopped. I had a taxi waiting. The driver was quiet, which I appreciated. He brought me to the serviced apartment the company had arranged, and I stood in the center of the small, clean room with my suitcase and looked out the window at the skyline. A skyline I didn't yet know. Buildings I couldn't yet name. A city that had not yet learned me. I put my bag down. I found a cafe around the corner on my phone. I walked there through streets that were just beginning to fill. I sat at the window with my coffee and watched the city wake up. A bus. Cyclists. Someone walking an enormous, ridiculous dog. Life, just continuing. As it always does. As it does regardless of everything that has led you to any particular window on any particular morning. The first 6 months were hard in predictable ways and surprising in unexpected ones. Work demanded everything I had. The team was good, but integration takes time. I made the kinds of professional mistakes that happen when you are learning a new organizational culture, a new rhythm, a new way of reading a room. I made them and I corrected them and I kept going. The city took longer than I expected to become mine. There is a specific loneliness that comes with starting over somewhere unfamiliar. Not desperate, not unbearable. More like a long adjustment period where everything around you is interesting, but nothing is yet comfortable. Where you walk into coffee shops alone, and it is fine, genuinely fine, but something in the back of your mind keeps a quiet accounting of what you left behind. Friends. History. The specific comfort of being understood without explanation. Aaron called me on Sunday afternoons when he could. He kept me anchored without meaning to. He complained about his own week and asked about mine and made me laugh and reminded me, reliably, that I was still myself even from 3,000 miles away. I met Fiona about 4 months in. Nothing dramatic. She worked at a company adjacent to mine, and we kept ending up in the same professional circles. Smart, direct, the kind of person who says exactly what she thinks and means precisely what she says. We became friends first. Genuinely friends. Coffees that extended into dinners. Walks around the city that became long conversations about work and life, and the specific experience of building something entirely new in a place that wasn't originally yours. She had done exactly what I was doing several years earlier. She understood the landscape in a way that helped me navigate it without making me feel like I needed a map. I am not going to tell you we fell dramatically in love. That is not what happened. What happened was slower and quieter and, in every way that matters, healthier for it. We simply liked each other. And over time, we liked each other more. One evening, after a dinner that had stretched well past what either of us had planned, she looked at me across the table and said, "Are you going to ask me out at some point, or are we just going to keep having dinners indefinitely?" I laughed. "I was building up to it," I said. "Build faster," she said. She smiled. I asked her out the following day. There is a version of this story where Claire is the villain, where the dinner was a deliberate humiliation, where I am entirely the wrong party and she is entirely to blame. I could tell it that way. It would probably be a more satisfying version for most people. Clean narratives are easier to carry, but that is not the true version. The true version is less convenient. The true version is that two people who genuinely cared for each other found themselves misaligned in a way neither of them had been fully willing to examine, and a Tuesday evening dinner forced the examination. The true version is that I had been ignoring things. Small things. Instincts I had overridden. Moments I had swallowed. The wedding of her friend. The particular look during the first dance. The expression I had seen and then deliberately looked past. The true version is that I had been so committed to the idea of us that I had stopped paying careful attention to the reality of us. And the dinner was a correction. Painful. Public. Completely without grace or timing. But a correction nonetheless. We spoke once more, about 8 months after I left the country. She called on a Sunday. I answered, maybe because I was in a good place by then, and good places tend to make you generous. She said she had been thinking about what happened. She had been in therapy. She said she now understood that the uncertainty she had been carrying had not been specifically about me, but about herself, about her own fears around permanence and commitment and the weight of something irreversible. She said she had been working on it. I told her I was genuinely glad to hear it. She asked if I was happy. I told her I was. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's all I needed to know." And we hung up. There is something I want to say about the night of the dinner itself. Specifically about what happened after I refilled my wine glass and asked my brother about the bread. At some point during the latter half of the meal, when conversation had mostly found its way back to the surface, I reached under the table and found Claire's hand. I held it for a moment. Just a moment. She turned to look at me. I looked back at her, and in that look, there was everything. All of it at once. The 3 years. The proposal on the couch. The ring box. The converted mill venue with the stone walls and the windows facing the river. The way she had stood in the main hall of that venue the first time we visited and turned slowly in a full circle, taking in the space with an expression of pure happiness. The wedding of her friend and the look on her face during the first dance. The expression I had noticed and looked away from. The 8 words. All of it, held inside a single look. And then I let go of her hand, and I turned back to my wine glass. And I was, for the first time in a very long time, completely clear. Not happy. Not yet. But clear. My brother visited last autumn. He stayed for a full week. We ate well and walked too much and had the kinds of long conversations that only happen when you are far from your ordinary life, and the usual defenses have been left behind. One evening, over dinner, he asked me if I ever thought about how differently things could have gone. If the wedding had simply proceeded. If I had found a way to move past that dinner and said, "Let's just get through this. Let's just do it," and trusted that whatever uncertainty existed would eventually resolve on its own. I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said. And I think we might have been okay," I said. "For a while. Maybe longer than a while. Just okay. Maybe more than that, for stretches." He was quiet for a moment. But that dinner would have come," I said. "Maybe not in a restaurant. Maybe not in front of anyone. But the uncertainty was in the room with us for months before it found its words. It was always going to find its words eventually." He nodded. He said, "Better it found them when it did." I said, "Yes. Much better." We were quiet for a while after that. In the good way. Fiona and I have been together nearly 2 years now. I want to say something careful about this. Not because it isn't good. It is. But I am aware of the narrative gravity in a story like this. The way the reader starts waiting for the replacement. The redemption. The new person who arrives as proof that the right choice was made. And Fiona is not that. She is not the answer to Claire. She is not the validation of any decision. She is a person I have come to love in the quiet, certain, particular way that you love someone you have chosen without the presence of another person's doubt in the room. She has never once made me feel like I was standing in front of someone who was still deciding. She told me she was certain about 6 months in, on a walk in the rain, without ceremony or occasion. She just said it like it was information I should have. I'm sure about you. I want you to know that. I stopped walking. I looked at her. She said, don't make it weird. I laughed. I'm sure about you too, I said. She took my hand. We kept walking. I still have the ring. It's in a drawer in my flat here. I keep meaning to do something with it. Sell it, most likely. Every few months I think about it, and then I don't do anything. Not because I'm holding on to something. I'm not. It's more that it doesn't feel urgent. It's just a ring in a drawer. It doesn't hold any power over me unless I give it power. So it sits there. And sometimes, on ordinary evenings, I open that drawer looking for something else and I see it. And I think, that was a year of my life. And then I close the drawer, and I continue with my evening. And that, I've come to believe, is probably the healthiest relationship a person can have with their own past. Not erased, not enshrined, just there, occupying its drawer, present but quiet. The city is good. Winter here is long, but never brutal. The kind of cold that clears your head rather than numbing it. I walk a lot. I have a route along the river, about 40 minutes, that I do most mornings when the weather allows. It gives me the particular quiet I need before a full day of thinking. I have good colleagues. A few people who have become real friends. The kind you call when something happens rather than when you've run out of things to say. I have Fiona. I have Aaron calling on Sunday afternoons from 3,000 miles away, reliable as ever. I have work that challenges me in the way that good work does. I have a city that is still, even now, teaching me things about itself. Conrad told me in my second annual review that I had grown more in 18 months here than most people grow in 5 years standing still. I thanked him. He said, what was the shift for you? I thought about it for a moment. I stopped building around someone else's uncertainty, I said. He nodded like that made complete sense. My mother called me the morning I left for the airport, the day I moved. She picked up on the second ring. I'm at the gate, I said. She said, are you okay? Good, I said. Really good? We're just saying it. Really good. Actually good. She was quiet for a moment. You sound different, she said. I'm the same, I said. No, she said. I could hear the smile in it. You sound the way you did at 23 when you told me you were going to travel alone for a summer. Like you were terrified and exactly where you were supposed to be at the same time. I laughed. Is that supposed to be reassuring? It is reassuring, she said. It means I recognize you. They called my boarding group. I have to go, I said. I know. Call when you land. I will. She said, I love you. I said, I love you too, Mom. And I boarded the plane. If there is anything I want someone to take from this story, it is not a lesson in red flags or a list of warning signs. It is simpler than that. When someone tells you where they are, believe them, even when the timing is catastrophic. Even when it costs you a deposit and 11 months of planning and a version of the future you had already started to live in your head. Believe them, because the alternative is not a wedding and a marriage. The alternative is a version of that life held together by the weight of everything that was never said and never resolved. And that weight is heavier than any venue deposit, heavier than any canceled caterer or returned honeymoon booking, heavier than 14 people going quiet all at once at a dinner table. Claire told me the truth, accidentally, publicly, at the worst possible moment, and it turned out to be the most important thing she gave me in 3 years. I am sitting at the window right now, the one that looks out at the river. The city is doing what it does on a Saturday morning. Slow, unhurried, full of ordinary people living their ordinary lives. Fiona is in the kitchen. I can hear the coffee. Later we are going for a walk along the water, and we will probably end up somewhere for lunch, and the afternoon will take its own shape without much planning. This is what it looks like when a life belongs to you. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a Saturday morning. A river, coffee in the kitchen, and the particular, quiet satisfaction of a person who stood up from a dinner table, thanked everyone for coming, and moved forward, one step at a time, into the life that had been waiting patiently for him to arrive.